have a bonus video here for you, and it's on the masking tool, which is another new feature in Lightroom 5. This masking tool right here allows us to create a mask in the image and then apply effects to that mask. You can do that using this brush option, which allows you to brush changes onto your subject. For example, if I took the brush and I brushed over my client, you can see what it's doing because I have the adjustment set to a negative exposure. If I went ahead and put that at 0, you'd see no adjustment. But if I started making changes maybe to highlights or shadows or something like that, you can see that it's only affecting the area that I brushed on. This is a good way to make changes to a specific area. For example, let's go ahead and just, I'm going to delete this brush that I made. We have this earlier issue with the blacks clipping in his nostril. If I was to go and shrink down this brush and then just paint inside the nostril area like so, I could, I'm just going to go ahead and set this exposure to 0 here, or pretty close to 0, and I could actually increase my exposure a little bit or increase the shadows to get rid of that clipped area completely without affecting the rest of my photo, which is pretty fantastic. So that's the adjustment brush there. Now I don't have that clipped area inside his nostril anymore. But the actual adjustment mask is a neat option as well, which I have the exposure set to negative 1.30 right now. I'm going to click in the middle of his head and drag out, and you can see what it's doing. It's creating like a vignette mask. And so I'm going to hold down the shift just to make it a perfect circle, and I'm going to drag it out. The further that I drag it out, the softer it gets, and the more it spreads out that mask. And then I'll let off, and I can go in and make adjustments accordingly. Like I can add in more feather, which smooths the transition. Or of course I can delete feather by sliding it over, which makes it really harsh transition. You'll probably almost never use 0 feather, but feathering it in brings that transition in nicely. And then if I was to click and close this, you can see now what I've done. It's kind of separating my subject more from the background. It's a smoother transition. Some people like this effect, this kind of smooth vignette. It's a feature that we haven't had in Lightroom because the only other way to add kind of a vignette, like let's go back, let's undo and get rid of this this mask altogether. The only other way to add kind of a vignette to our image is to go in and adjust the vignetting slider here, which we can add in white or we can add in dark, or we can also go in and do it this way. But it's not very clean. It's kind of shaped oddly. It's not a round, nice vignette. It kind of pulls in from the edges, and I've never really liked this option as far as adding a vignette to the image. And if I have wanted to add a vignette, I'd have to go into Photoshop and do it. But now having this option to just create a mask, and I'll just go ahead and drag that out, just like before, until it's where I like it. I mean, I can make this mask huge if I want, and then I can drag it around and reposition it, and you'll notice it almost looks like a light source to my image. So I find that spot where I want it to be centered and just leave it at that, and then I can hit the return key to apply that, and then I have that effect there. I can even stack these masks. So for example, if I wanted a nice fall off in my image like you have here, you have him fully exposed in the middle, and then it falls off into a darker mask on the outer side, I can add a secondary mask right here and then make that transition even more gradual. So you can stack masks, which is kind of neat, but your masks will affect each other. If I was, for example, to add a mask over here, you'll notice that the mask is falling off over the top of my subject. So this isn't going to work for me. I'd have to move the mask over onto his face in order for it to work. But if I was to 0, let's move this mask down here. If I was to 0 this out, So zero out with the exposure. So now this mask effectively is doing nothing. I could use my my highlight slider and make kind of a gradient effect across my image. There's lots of different things you can see here, and really the only way to figure them out is just to play with them. You know, load up an image, start throwing some masks over the top, dragging some sliders around, and seeing what you get. It's a really neat option, and something that I've really fallen in love with using in Lightroom is this ability to make changes and adjust these masks in this way instead of just painting. The adjustment brush, of course, has been fantastic, and I've loved using that. But using this this adjustment mask is fantastic because it allows me to create a nice circular mask or any other shape that I want, and gradient out my my adjustments in a different way that I would typically have to do in Photoshop. So yet another feature that prevents us from having to go into Photoshop, which is fantastic.